Thank you guys all for coming out. I see a lot of familiar faces. A lot of you have been at the previous workshops, a few new people. So those that are here for the first time, this is the third workshop that we've had like this, but don't feel like you're going to miss out on anything. It's not like the workshops are building on top of each other or anything like that. We're just here with the overall goal to see, share what we're doing with you, share some of our challenges with you, and try to hear from the audience and our members on, what direction we should be heading. It's always good to hear that kind of input, and we'll jump into it. So the topic this time around, I don't think we really have any scheduled periodic time we have these. It's just whenever I can get a presentation cranked out, I try to do one every now and then. But over our last two workshops, it seemed like whenever we threw numbers on the board that talked about costs and this and that, everybody wanted to take a deeper dive into that part of it. And so, I think it deserved a little more of a deeper dive. And so we're going to do that with this time and see how it all goes. I'm just wondering if this is like the brides and the groom's side here. It's a little heavily weighted on this side. Everybody here's ready to make the quick exit whenever they can. I see how it all works. So although our outline is fairly short here, I think it's going to take a little bit of time. I've got more slides in the deck here than I've had typically, and I know we've run the full 2 hours, so don't feel bad if I cut you off, because we will have to want to try to get moving through this stuff so we get through all the material. But I also really want everybody to be interactive, throw the questions at us as we go through here, and that's what I think makes that discussion flow a little bit better. But so the first thing is really understanding what LPEA's expenses are. And when I say LPEA, and I'm going to talk LPEA and La Plata, I mean, I'm talking us as a whole. We're all LPEA, right? And you're our members. We all pay to make this all work here. And so when I refer to LPEA, I'm referring to all of us here. And so just so we know what those expenses are, what's driving them. And then we're going to jump into more of the economics of a few different scenarios. Just got a few different things that we'll look at, how we do net metering, how that impacts us. We do some purchase power agreements. That's another form of which we can put solar onto our system here, and how some of those economics work. And then we're going to touch on the economics of energy storage. I'm not an energy storage expert. But I just wanted to show you what some of the stuff that we've discovered along the way has been. So we'll jump into that. So, the first question I want to get answered is, is it all about the economics? Is economics the only thing you guys focus on? Well, the answer is no. Now, we really try, although economics plays a large role in it, we try to balance things. We're trying to balance that economics with environmental responsibility. It's part of our mission statement. And where that balance lies, that's where some of the tension begins, and where the arguments start on how much focus should we put on the economics versus the environmental responsibility. So that's a role that our board of directors deal with all the time. That's a tough role to figure out. But it's important for those economics to be known, just so we know where we stand on a relative matter on a lot of these things. And as I talked before, when I say LPEA, it's us. Our revenue comes from one place, and it's our members. LPEA doesn't make money. We are here to serve our members at a cost, and so we have a cost that has to be covered by members. If we collect more revenue than we had expenses, that's what gets returned back to our members in the form of capital credit checks. And so that's how that process works, is us being a cooperative here. Okay? And as I mentioned, that board of directors is that entity that really is the one that has to balance where that lies, and what do we invest in this, and how much do we put towards this effort or that effort. Okay? So here's my caution. Here's my warning. I won't feel bad if anybody dozing off. It's okay. There's a lot of numbers here, so we'll get through this. So we're going to jump into the understanding of the expenses. Now, part of what you can do is go online to our website, and you can download our annual report. A lot of LPEA's financial health can be found in that annual report, and so I encourage you all to go there to that. There's the link. This is being video recorded, so don't worry too much about taking notes. You can always go back and try to gather some of these longer URLs and the such when you do that, but it's fairly easy to navigate to just from our homepage there, okay? And that's the real high overview of our financials that you can get in that annual report. Then occasionally we do what's called a cost of service study. And that's when we take each one of the expenses that La Plata Electric has and we try to figure out which class of customers is responsible for that expense. Is that a residential expense? Is it a commercial expense? Is it a large industrial customer expense? For instance, some of our large industrial customers are served straight from a transmission line. It goes right into their facilities. So how much of our large expanse of distribution lines that go across the county should the industrial customers be responsible for paying for? You know, the answer is none, because they don't use those facilities, right? And so that's what the cost of service study does, is it goes through each one of those classes of customers and says, what are their characteristics? What kind of expenses do they cause to La Plata Electric? And that way, if everybody's paying their share, if we were to lose an industrial customer, it doesn't put an overwhelming burden on the rest of our residential members, okay? And so we like to try to keep those costs and everything equitable for everybody. So if one class goes away or something, everything remains whole. Then the other part of the cost of service study is then, after you split it up into classes of customers, is trying to group it into categories that, I'll call it expense categories, or I call it expense groups on the slide there. Because some of our expenses are driven by different things. Sometimes it's driven by just you being a customer, being there. We have to talk to you. We have customer service and billing. Or maybe it's driven by the amount of electricity you consume and the rate that you consume it. And so different expenses are driven by different things, and we'll get into that here shortly. So these are the four basic groups that we split our expenses into when we do a cost of service study. The first one is a customer expense, and as I mentioned earlier, that's really what's driven by just us being a customer of La Plata Electric. We have an expense whether you use any electricity or not. We print a bill, we go and read a meter, we have to actually physically put a meter out there. There's some secondary wire, a little bit of plant, but it's mostly that customer service billing kind of expenses that get associated with that. Then the next thing is called LPEA facilities. That's what we call a demand charge. And sometimes if you're a commercial customer, you might be familiar with a demand charge. But as far as residents go, you don't see anything on your bill usually that says demand, and that's to pay for facilities. And so it splits that apart, you know, another line item on your bill. But what that is, it's those facilities required to serve your maximum load. It's the substations, it's the wires, the poles, the transformers, those things that really get that electricity to you. And so you can look at that as somewhat of a fixed cost too, but it's largely driven by, you know, what demand you put on the system there. Then the next two items are called purchase power. Okay, this is the wholesale power that we purchase from our wholesale provider, Tri-State. And we pay Tri-State on two components. Okay, there's two components to our bill. One's demand, and then, so what demand is, it's that maximum draw that we have during the month. You know, we as La Plata Electric, our maximum draw on the system is about 150 to 160 megawatts. Okay, so the lower that we can keep that peak down and still do all the things that we want to do, you know, keep a nice level profile, the better, more efficient we run our system. Because that last item, the energy, is something we pay for regardless to do what we do. But if we can sort of spread things out, and that's the purpose of our time of use rate, try to get people to move their usage from those on-peak times to those off-peak times and try to level things out. And so when that breaks out, and this is a pie chart for La Plata Electric as a whole, it's our residential customers, our commercial customers, our industrial customers. As a whole, this is how that breaks out. 9% of those expenses are customer expense. 28% are our facilities that La Plata Electric has going all over the county. Okay, it's when you look and see lines going down the road, we have maintenance on those lines, we have depreciation, we have interest. Those are very large expenses for us. It's the next largest expense to purchase power that we have. And so then purchase power is what makes up the majority of LPEA's expenses. It ranges from, it's as low as 63% this year, but typically in the 70% range. Usually 70% of our expenses as Plata Electric as a whole is purchase power. And I'm sort of giving you this background here so it makes more sense when we jump into the next slides and start looking at some of these more specific items. So we'll look at the drivers of those. And I think we talked about the customer one already. That's driven by the number of customers that we have. LPEA demand. So we build our facilities. You know, what do we build our facilities to serve? Well, we build our facilities to serve the maximum load on our system that would show up the entire year. We don't want to say, oh, look, we've got facilities that'll serve our summertime load, but in the wintertime, gosh, you know, voltage drops and wires burn down, and that we don't want that. We have to size our facilities so we can meet that demand, meet the needs of our customers for us, it's the coldest day of winter. A lot of utilities are peak in the summertime. With Plata Electric's a little different. We will peak in the wintertime because we are a mountain town. We don't have a whole lot of air conditioning load, and we usually peak in the wintertime. Then, so that's what drives that expenses. Whatever customers, if you're using more during our peak times, you contribute more to that expense, is how that works. Purchase power demand. So this is that demand component that we pay on our wholesale power bill. Now this is the trickiest one to understand. That's driven by what our customers are using at the time LPEA peaks during Tri-State's peak period. Okay, that's a whole mouthful there. So I've got a little chart here. I've got two lines on here. One, this is a 3-day span of time that we're looking at here. The blue line is our load, our peak period, our peak time during the winter. Okay, that was, I think, December 26th is, so we're probably looking at 25th, 26th, and 27th of December there. And then the yellow-orange line is our summer profile, and that's our peak draw in the summertime. So you can see winter is a little bit higher than what it was in the summertime. Okay. Now, and so when we get billed by our wholesale supplier, they aren't looking for that peak time, no matter when it happens. They have a peak period. They're saying we have to build. Our wholesale supplier says we have to build our facilities to serve a peak that typically occurs between noon and 10 p.m. So we're going to bill you, Plata Electric, for your maximum demand between noon and 10. Now, if we did a really good job of not using electricity between noon and 10, and we peaked outside of those windows like at 6 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, we don't get charged demand for that. We'll get charged for the energy we use during that time, but not that demand. That demand is a really expensive part of our bill. It's about 50% of our bill is that demand component, that peak draw. So if we can keep that down, that's the whole point of our time of use. Yes, BJ?
But with your demand one, there's only a difference between the low peak and the high peak, and that's the only thing you control. You don't control, like, you know, it going to say 120 megawatts.
Right. Yeah, that little fluctuation there. That's exactly right. So he brings up a good point. Now you might notice the scale on this chart here. I don't go to zero. If my scale on this chart went all the way down to zero, this would look actually pretty flat. But I'm going from 70 megawatts to 150, so we can see the variations here. But you know, if we go and cut things out, you know, ideally from Tri-State's perspective, they'd love to see a nice flat load. That way they put in generation facilities to serve that, and it's being used all the time. That's the most efficient way to use something. But they've given us the pricing signal for right now that says, hey, but we're really concerned about this period here, and if you can reduce energy during that period, we can all save some money. But now if every utility that Tri-State serves, all 43 of them got really, really good at not using electricity between noon and 10 p.m., well, Tri-State would change that signal, and they'd have to come tell us. It's like, well, that may not be our peak anymore. Maybe now it's this peak period. You know, it's the pricing signal that we have right now, though, that we're trying to follow. And that could change in the future. Same with our time of use rates. You know, if we all do a very good job, and we have to, it takes a lot to move that many megawatts. It really does. And you can see in that winter profile, can you see which profile looks flatter? It's that winter one, right? Summer has a lot more variation between the lows and the highs. Does anybody know why that is?
Air conditioning.
Air conditioning. We do not control air conditioners, so those do tend to push that up. But why is the winter so flat, do we think?
Lights.
Heating? You guys all do a really good job with our time of use program, is honestly what that comes down to. When I looked at and I just did this for a presentation I got to give next week, I looked at our load profile from 1998, before we really started doing time of use. There was just as much fluctuation in our winter profile as there is in the summer, back in 1998. But we've all done a very good job at sort of sculpting that. Yes, Tim?
How much of that peak is residential versus commercial?
So residential, and I probably mislabeled this, I should say entire LPEA load instead of just residential loading here. We are about a 30-30-30 split is what we used to be. It's varied from that a little bit. Mike, do you know better numbers than that? It's pretty even, residential, commercial, industrial. Industrial's dropped, residential's come up a little bit.
So about 30% of that peak would be a residential contribution?
Well, a lot of that peak is from residential contribution because the industrial and commercial is very flat. So that's that base load underneath it. So these variations that we're seeing are largely in the residential class that we're looking at there. Yes, Susan?
I've heard some of the board members use these words, and I think I have the words right, that Plata Electric is a wires company. Okay. Do I have the words right?
That's been said.
And what does that mean?
So we do not generate the electricity. You know, we just get it from point A to point B. So we own the wires that make that happen. And so, you know, whereas there's other companies that are vertically integrated, like Excel, they have generators, they have transmission lines and distribution lines, own it all the way from the generator down to the consumer. Holy Cross, are some other co-ops that have more of a vertical integration as well. Okay? So I think that's all I needed to say here. We're going to come back to these profiles here again in a little bit and dig a little more into those. So then that last item is that energy. And you can look at energy as sort of that area underneath that graph, okay? That's, the analogy I like to make is demand is like the speedometer on your car, and energy is like the odometer on your car. That speedometer tells you how fast you're going, demands how much you're drawing, okay? The odometer accumulates all along, all through the month. The energy accumulates all through the month, okay? And so if you finished, you know, if you're doing a bike ride or something and you looked at your maximum speed, that's like demand, okay? That's my maximum speed, that's my demand, and those miles that you rode would be like the energy, okay? So we're looking at that, zoom in on just this wintertime load right now. And we're going to play some what-if games. And, you know, these are just some scenarios I brought up, and we're just going to look at some of these things on what's happening here. So with this winter, you can look at that peak in the middle of the screen right there, the one to the left of the red line, and you might say, that one's higher. Why weren't you charged for what you used during that time? Well, that's outside of that peak period window. That was in the morning, early morning. So that one didn't count. They looked at the next highest one, which is sitting right there, about 140 megawatts, okay? For our ultimate peak time all year long fell on December 26th at 6:30 p.m. That was, you know, we get charged for demand each month, so that was certainly what they charged, and that's what we build our facilities to. And so when we overlay what a solar profile would look like on top of that, now this is all real data. This is information that was taken from solar during those peak days. So actually the solar produced very well during those peak days. You don't see a lot of some of the solar days are real choppy, clouds coming over, but the snows, this is typically what happens in the wintertime, right? It snows, it gets really cold, and then it blows out, and what happens? It gets really, really cold after that storm blows out. And so that's a lot of times what drives. And then you tack onto that the Christmas lights that everybody still has on, even though they're, and honestly, we used to see a much larger fluctuation in our December load, but we don't see that nearly as much now because Christmas lights are LEDs now. Very good class. So yeah, it's really fun to see. Yes.
Is the peak measured as an instantaneous moment, or is it over the whole cumulative over the 12 to 10?
That's a great question. It's sort of like a ratchet, and so it's. Oh, I'm sorry. Good. So she asked, is that peak demand something that accumulates throughout the month, or is it, an instantaneous?
Oh, I'm actually meaning in any given day, because if their peak is from noon to 10 p.m., is it the whole amount of power in that time, or is it during 1 second?
Okay.
Because you can see on the middle one, you might actually be able to change it if it's a cumulative thing as opposed to an instantaneous thing.
Right. So she asked, is it instantaneous or is it a measure of what happens during that entire period, essentially? It's somewhere between the two. It's a 30-minute window. And so they're looking from noon to 12:30, 12:30 to 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock to 1:30, and looking for what you've used the most in each one of those. Okay, so this is actually looking from 6 to 6:30 is when we use the most power, and that's what we're bill demand for. And that's the same way we bill our commercial customers as well.
So, since it's a sliding scale like that, this is where a limited amount of storage should be able to run peaks cost
Right.
effective.
Right. Yeah, and so, we pay quite a bit for that peak. Like I said, that's 50% of our bill. And so, but what would happen if I knocked that peak off where that red line is, and I took out 20 megawatts out of there? Okay. Well, I better have done it the day before too, and probably the day before that. Now, obviously there's some fluctuation there between 20 and 140 megawatts. So I've got maybe 20 megawatts in there to sort of play with. But you almost have to have that battery system activated all the time to really flatten it out completely. Whereas if and we've looked at putting in a 1 megawatt hour energy storage system, because then I can just snip that top part off. And I might have to activate that maybe 7 or 8 times a month, as opposed to if I got really ambitious with it, and we're going to look at an example of that here in a little bit, what that might look like.
But Tri-State will still charge you for, even if you had a flat load, they'll still charge you, say, at 100 megawatts, and that would be your demand charge no matter what, right? Even if it's perfectly flat.
That's right, unless I carved out a complete noon to 10 p.m. chunk, okay? And it would only be a matter of time before, if other utilities at Tri-State would say, okay, enough playing games, what we're really looking for is a level load. But right now they're trying to send that signal to us to take some of that away so that they can achieve level. But really that's the best we can hope for. If we start getting less greedy and get beyond that, then it's only a matter of time before things probably catch up.
So overall, in here, the best case scenario is we optimize about 20%.
Right. That's if Tri-State left their rates, and I knew that was going to, because when we make investments in things, I'd like to make sure that that's going to be something I can utilize for many years to come. I'd hate to see something I'm banking on a 20-year return, and then I install that, and then the rules of the game change. So that's definitely that 20 megawatts at 15 to 20% that we have to work with there. Okay.
Tri-State gave their presentation, I guess last one or whatever, they implied that actually their load over the whole system was pretty flat, and they didn't really have much of an issue with peaking loads having to be bought off the spot market or whatever.
Right.
I know this is a very complicated question, but I'm interested in your opinion. Is Tri-State fairly breaking it out in terms of charging 50% of the cost on peak? Or is that something that's a cash cow for them?
That's a great question. So if you recall, in 2014, Tri-State implemented a new rate structure that we complained about. And they basically went to an all energy type of rate structure with no demand charge. And, we said, well, that's probably not quite right because you've got things that you go to build facilities for to serve that peak load. So they actually hired third-party consultants to come and tell them just exactly that. They went through and said, okay, the fuel that you put into the generator, that's definitely an energy-related charge. That generation that you use to serve that base load, that's probably energy-related. And there's a few different ways you could move some of these things around. But then that generator that you have that serves those peaks, okay, that goes more towards a demand charge. The primary driver of a demand charge is the transmission lines that go to service. So that all lands on the demand. So they do their best with standard industry practices to split that out as well as they can. Okay, if that sort of helps. So I feel it is a fair breakout of what that is. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I mean, the cost of transmission lines is not driven just by the demand of December 26, but anticipated growth in the area as well, because they oversized the lines in anticipation of future growth.
But all to serve that growth, that demand.
Right. But that also means that the sort of the overhead of that is somewhat keyed into how fast the area is growing and so forth. And there's a lot of complexity there.
There is. And it's really hard to, you don't want to overbuild, you don't want to underbuild. It's all sort of a balance. Tim, you had a question?
Yes, so if you were to shave that 20 meg you mentioned, is that one consistent charge, or is it based upon what that peak achieved? So in other words, if you shave 10, would it be more expensive than shaving 20? Or is it essentially whatever your peak is?
Let me see if I caught what you said. So if I shave, it's a lot easier for me to shave 1 megawatt than it is 5 megawatts. Because 1 megawatt, look at it as a triangle. And let's say our peak looks like a triangle. It doesn't take a whole lot of energy for me to clip this top part right here. That first megawatt comes pretty easy. That second megawatt, now it's this area down here. It's a little bigger. And it sort of widens as we go down. So the low-hanging fruit's up top, easy pickings, but it is all, so for instance, this example right here, 140 megawatts, okay? Let's say our peak was 140, Tri-State, it's approximately $20. So 140,000 times 20. That's the demand component. So if I can lower 140 down to 130, that's 10,000 times 20. $200,000 we just saved on our power bills.
Wow.
So it's $20 per
KW.
per
Kilowatt, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a big benefit to be reaped there.
I understand that the blue line is what we actually are using, and this is a real thing. So the overlay, does that mean that we're not even touching what we need with solar?
So another good question, asking if that solar represents what we have, does it even touch what we have? If I were to put our real solar profile up here, it would not exceed the number 6. Okay, that's how much solar we really have on our system. What I'm showing, look at the scale on the right for this curve. I was just showing what % of solar was on. Let me open up my next thing here. There. So all I'm saying is that I didn't have any solar on. There was at 0% at the time we peaked. So the solar did not help reduce my power bill to Tri-State, is all I'm trying to say on this. Okay, but this is a winter scenario.
Demand.
I'm sorry, demand, thank you. So this is a winter scenario though. Let's look at the summer, because it's a little different. Even though the peak was at the same time, 6:30, the sun is out a little bit at 6:30 during the summertime. And so there is at least a little bit there. There's 18% coincidence on this particular summer day. Okay, once again, this is real actual load profiles, and I love it when our peak day happens to be on a sunny day when the solar can be there. So we went through and looked at each one of the months for the last 12 months just to see what was there and what wasn't. And, because you can't just use the time of day actually, because, it might be during daylight hours, but it may have been a cloudy day. It depends on what's driving the peak. But you can see very consistently we peak in the early evening. And that just isn't very coincident in the winter, fall, spring months, but we do gain some benefit in the summertime. August was particularly good at 53% because it was a 5 o'clock p.m. peak and there was still quite a bit of sun out. Average availability about 7%. When I ran this for 26, well, probably a 12-month period a year ago, it was a little better. It was about 7% coincident then at that point. Or I'm sorry, not 7, but 10. When we looked at the tracking system that the Southern Utes has on theirs, much better, okay? Especially in those July and June months, we were near 80, 90% with a tracker because it's going to face towards that sun and gain that late afternoon sun that we get. So that was a particular benefit there. Yes?
So, depending on the system, I guess, would the cost, the benefit that the tracker give override the cost of a tracking system? Because I know they're pretty prohibitively expensive sometimes.
Right. And I'm going to go out on a ledge here, and this is my internet research. Somebody can correct me, the solar installers in the room, but I saw that about 30 cents a watt added for tracking is what I saw. And for things like that, I don't know if anybody's jumping up and down saying no, it's more, it's less. But if that's about right, then it can make sense to do things like that. But that's something that benefits La Plata Electric, not necessarily the customer that's paying to put it in. Now, if La Plata Electric were to put a solar array in, yes, I'd put a tracker in because I'd get that bang for the buck and make that happen. If we can provide that right rate signal, provide a little more incentive to somebody to put a tracking system in. This is our first large-scale system we've seen with something like that. Thanks, Rebecca. That went in like that. So that's a great thing to see.
And I'm sorry if you answered it before. How many megawatts do you have of solar here?
There's about 6 in total. Well, 6 net metered, another megawatt. No, I think it's 6 in total. Is what we have. So that was laying the background down. Now we're going to jump into that sort of that net metering example that we have here, knowing some of this information that we have here. So we looked earlier at this pie chart on the left, which is the total expense breakout of La Plata Electric. This pie chart on the right is that of residential systems, or our residential class. And you'll see that I have more expense in customer because obviously I sell a lot of kilowatt hours to industrial and commercial customers, and I still just have the same one person to talk to. So when I start talking to residents, I'm smaller volume of kilowatt hours, same customers, customer expense per unit goes up. I also have a lot more facilities on the ground to serve them because I talked about the network that we have that extends across the 2 counties that we serve. And therefore, with those being larger, that inherently makes the purchase power side smaller. So really, you can look at it and say it's really 50-50. 50% of what you pay in an electric bill goes to Tri-State, goes to pay for the wholesale power that we buy. 50% goes to La Plata Electric for our facilities and customer service kind of things, okay? So, a lot of this is built around the average customer when we do those cost of service studies, and we look at all of our customers, but of course all of them sort of come down to an average. So in this example, I'm going to grab just a few different slices of different types of customers so we can see what that looks like and we're just looking at the expense side of things now. And so with those percentages, our total expenses, I use a laser pointer to point at the screen that nobody sees. That's a good idea, but those, if I really want to point something, I guess I'll use this. Our total expenses to serve a residential customer, when we do that cost of service study, it's about $100, okay? And this is how it breaks out. We've got about $16.44 in customer expense, and we have some demand expenses, LPEA demand, purchase power demand, and the energy. Now, these are once again using real numbers. We have interval data with our AMI meters now. We can go out there and say, yes, this is exactly how much we have in facilities. Here's how much they were using at the time of the peak. Here's how much time they were using when Tri-State peaked. Here's how much energy they used. So this is pretty accurate when we go through here. Now, one thing you might be looking at and saying, wait a minute, 1644 for a customer charge, which is sort of analogous to our base charge that we charge on our tariffs. Now wait a minute, 1644, I pay 2150. Why is there a difference there? Well, that's because your residential rate has only two components. There's only that base charge and an energy charge. We don't have a demand charge on residential. Some utilities are moving towards that. It's a somewhat complicated concept to have on a regular residential bill. I think somebody asked in here who does that as far as co-ops go. I know I recently remembered that Intermountain REA does that. They have a demand charge on residential. But that's so we only have the two components, the energy and the base, so we have to do something with the demand. And we put 10% of the LPA demand. One could argue that, well, all LPA demand, that's sort of a fixed expense. That could all go up to the base charge, but none of us want to pay a $50 base charge if I were to add those two together. Some co-ops have headed that way. Some are $30, $35. That's once again, this is our board at work. We go back and forth and say, what should that base rate be? How much of that LPA demand should we put in base? How much should we keep volumetric is what we call it when we put that charge in an energy charge? That means if you buy the kilowatt hours, we recover that cost. If you don't buy the kilowatt hours, we don't recover that cost. So we put 10% in customers, what we've done historically. So that's the average member, typical member. I looked at a large usage member, same customer charge, that they still call in, same meter, same bill. They have more demand. Somebody asked in our meeting yesterday, well, how come they're using 3 times as much, but the demand only went up maybe twice as much? Well, that's because they have what's called a better load factor. Those high usage customers tend to have stuff on that stays on a lot of the time, and so their profile isn't as spiked as maybe the average person would be. Once again, using some real data here that we've collected through our system. I can tell you that what they did have on during peak, though, was about 3 times more, because they do have everything on during the peak time, just like everybody else would. And the energy, if we multiply out the 1848 kilowatt hours times our energy rate, that's the purchase power energy expense that we have. So large high usage member cost us $222. We looked at a low usage member for the heck of it. That was $66.36. They're using less, similar, like the other guy was using more. And we also looked at a solar profile. Now this would be a customer just like our typical customer that once used 654 kilowatt hours, but now has everything offset 100% by solar. So you can see we have the same customer charge, 1644. That LPA demand, you'll notice that didn't change, because how much of that solar was on at 6:30 on December 26th? Nothing. And so we still have to have those same facilities out there to serve the solar customer. Whereas purchase power demand, it did go down a little bit. We talked about that 7% decrease. There is some solar on during times of the summer, so that did go down a little bit. The great news is they completely offset all of our energy expense. So no energy expense that we have for that solar member. So the total expenses for that customer is about $69.78. Yes?
In the first 3 examples, that's based on empirical data. On the 4th column, you're projecting from the assumption that their usage pattern is the same, it's just that their billing is different.
Yeah, I'm saying we've got these actual customers. If these actual customers were to put solar on their roof, and I sized that solar array and used a profile that is very well known, an actual profile on that, that's what it turns out to be.
But it's not actual solar members.
That is not actual solar members. And but I've got plenty of actual solar members that would show just that.
But you've got some that would be otherwise as well. For example, the average solar member probably doesn't offset 100%, right? I mean, most people aim to be below 100%.
Probably have just as many above as I do below. Some are at 200%.
Well, I think it would be useful to use an actual empirical data on
Yeah,
the demand and the energy and so forth, because a lot of people, for whatever reason, purchase less, or
Right.
have less than the total.
And what we're ultimately going to break this down to is a per kilowatt hour, and so it sort of neutralizes that aspect of it, is what I would hope we all agree to. So. Now let's, these were the,
Nonetheless,
Oh.
$21 connect charge doesn't cover that.
it doesn't cover. So
Imagination.
that's the part we're getting to next. You read our mind here. So now we're going to add the revenue part to it and roll up those expenses and say, okay, what do we have for revenue? So for that typical member, the high usage member, the low usage, and the solar member. Solar members avoided the kilowatt hours. You know, and that's the problem that the utility industry has. We still have a lot of our fixed cost rolled up into that volumetric pricing. So we're not trying to be the big evil utility when we say that, gosh, we're having a hard time making things work because of what's going on here. But that's just part of the story. The other part is, well, what do we want to incentivize to have happen? So it could be anywhere in between there. You know, once again, the purpose of this is just to show sort of what's going on and understand what Plata Electric's doing today. And then it's up to our board of directors to say, is that the path we want to keep going? Do we want to put more incentive to it, less incentive to it? That type of thing. So then this would be our margin that would typically come out of that. It's the difference. So, you know, the typical member, that's typical for our margins, you know, 4% or so, 4 to 5%. But it's no surprise that the solar, you know, we are not, and I don't want to use the term Plata Electric is not making money on that because we have to cover our expenses, right? And I think Tri-State said it the same way. We can do whatever our membership wants us to do. It's just a matter of how do we get the funds that we need to cover the expenses we have. And so we have a lot of options at our disposal. And so, you know, what we're choosing to do right now is to have that $48 come from different other sources than that member. So to sort of sum that up, you know, for that typical 654 kilowatt hour member, our expenses decreased by nearly $29, but our revenues decreased by 82. So that's one of the challenges we're faced with right now. Is it a challenge? You know, is that intentional? You know, can we say that is what we want to do? That is what our membership wants us to do. I think it's just important that we know that's where we stand, so we know which decisions we want to make on that. So that net impact, you know, comes out to about 8.1 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yes.
How would your typical commercial customer look? Because they have different energy needs than residential.
Right. That's another good question. She asked, what would the typical commercial customer look like on something along this? One of the differences is with commercial customers, we do charge a demand charge. And so instead of getting a 12.6 cent credit, they get closer to a 7.8, 7.9 cent credit. And so that already has closed that gap by 5 cents. Okay, so it's a lot more, since we actually have that rate broken out into the various components, not that they're perfect, but it's a lot closer than it would be with the residential model.
Dan, I have a question.
I'm afraid to ask on call on you.
Pardon me?
I'm afraid to call on
Did you
you.
get, how did you get in a lightning storm on Sunday?
No, I missed it.
So did we. So I guess my question is, do you have a similar chart as this for, say, rural customers? Like, you know, if someone's close to a substation, how much they cost Plata Electric, if they're 5 miles out,
Sure.
if they're 10 miles out, 20, 30, and to the most remote
Right.
customers, do you have that broken down so we can see that?
Right.
And I guess if, I'm not sure, oh well.
Yes, we did a study on that in 2016 when we really took a deep dive into various rates and different options we could look at. And it gets somewhat complicated, as everything does, right? You know, because we have substations in very remote areas. And so what do you say the customer is that's, you know, right outside the door of the substation, but yet they are remote? You know, we still don't have very many facilities that serve them. You know, so I could have somebody over near Chimney Rock that might be off of a Yellow Jacket substation that is actually closer to a facility than somebody up Junction Creek that's off, you know, logistically. in town.
Okay, so I didn't ask it right, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I
Away
understand.
from your
To get
central
that
grid,
rural, and so what it came down
including
to,
those remote substations.
we looked at it and we tried to comprehend what some of the differences were, the highs and the lows. And yes, there were some very, very highs. They weren't necessarily in the places you might think they were. It's sort of hard to compile the data, but it came down to, how would you fairly even try to place an algorithm over the top of that? And so yes, there are differences, and that's what comes up a lot of times. It's like, yes, there might be a subsidy. Why are you attacking this subsidy and not that subsidy? And we discuss those, and some we can actually, look at and try to address, and others, it's honestly quite difficult to address and say what's fair, along those lines. And you have people lobbying, well, you need to come put a substation over here, then my costs go down, and then we infill and things like that.
So I guess, do you consider the solar a subsidy, like the LPEA subsidy?
I used that S word again, didn't I, Harry? I tried to avoid the S word. I intentionally didn't put it up there this time.
I raised my hand.
And so, yeah, subsidy is a strong word, and we all, cringe at that one a little bit. But, really, it's just that, that is an incentive that is given to one that the others are helping to pay for. And is that what we want to do as a cooperative?
Right, and that's what we've historically done, right, to move in the direction that we all want to move. And I'm just thinking that maybe that's changing from getting electricity out to every last person, and it might be moving towards a cleaner, more local electric grid. And so, so I guess I would think more it's the people who have paid for solar are actually subsidizing Plata Electric, and that the money you're spending extra is more leveraging our money that we've spent on solar. It's not like we're driving Cadillacs or something. We're actually making energy that is getting shared around the grid, and for, in theory, a good cause that maybe the utility wants to go.
Right, and we can certainly, and I'm talking the way things are today without, energy shaping anything like that, and we can certainly appreciate the energy that's provided by solar. It's great. It saves us from having to purchase that energy. I don't think I would go as far as to say that the solar industry is helping the rest of our membership at this point.
No, because from your curves, clearly this isn't the end point, right? This is, we're building up solar to eventually get to a point where those curves will match with storage and solar and your pricing structure and all the things that we want to move to. But I think at this point the solar is part of the building blocks for where we want.
What we have today is not what we're going to have tomorrow. And we need to find, and that's why I'm sharing this kind of stuff with you. We need to find ways to, either move our load to the middle of the day or to move that energy out into the evening, or a combination of both. I mean, it's all sorts of things. And one day when, we have a little fluctuations in our load. It's like we talked, that 15 to 20% going up and down. One day I could see that really leveling out. And then what's the next step after that? It's like, well, now I want to encourage people to use electricity during the day when we can offset that with solar. And then, we may get to the point where we encourage people to use electricity, by giving a cheap price during the day, at the same time incentivizing solar to produce during that time. That's definitely in the cards. Oh boy, that stirred up a bunch of, Harry,
So is that 8 cents per kilowatt hour? Is that just residential class? Or?
That is just residential class. Yeah, it wouldn't be 8 for commercial. It'd be closer to 3.
That's distributed over.
Yeah, most of our installations are residential in nature.
Yeah, so it'd be a lot less than that for residential customers.
No. It is that for residential. Oh, you mean that's what it is. Yeah, over everybody. Yes, we have not raised rates 8.1 cents on everybody to accommodate this. So I think that's the next part here. But what we have done, we do have 10 million kilowatt hours of net metered solar, and so that impacts us $810,000 annually. That sounds like a big number, but we're $100 million annual revenue. And so that turns out to say our rates are 0.8% higher today to accommodate that. That's the way it is. But
Yes.
If I understand this correctly, a typical residential user that puts rooftop solar on their house, they're gonna save about $80 a month.
Yes. Yes, because the average bill's, say, $100 and they are paying 21.
But about 53 of that is being borne by other members.
Right.
So depending on how the board decision
Right.
on rates in the future, you might actually only be saving $50.
That's right, it can change. He was wondering, maybe changes in the future from different rate schedules, like we've talked about going time of use, that can alter this, okay? And so whatever decisions are made at different times, yes, that can say, or they might say, hey, that's not enough to make this, what we want to have happen, and put more incentive. Maybe we got a rebate on top of that. It could go either way.
So on that, if it's 0.8% higher to accommodate current net metering, if I did my math right, that's 8 cents on the $100 bill, right? Or am I missing something? Sorry, 80 cents. Yes, sorry, 80 cents. 80 cents on the $100 bill.
Yep.
And that's spread over 45,000 meters?
For the 6 megawatts that we have installed right now, yes.
Make sure.
Yep, it's always, that's, you always got to put things in perspective, right? I mean, $810,000, oh, big number, but out of 100 million, 0.8%.
So with respect to the net metering, you're only measuring at the meter, correct? So you don't know how much that solar customer is putting their peak demand during the middle of the day when they have solar energy, correct? So you're producing solar at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're running your dishwasher, you're running your dryer, you're running as much as you can at that time. You don't have an idea, LPEA can't measure how much they're consuming in their house, is that correct?
That's right, yeah, we just know net. We do know, what the other 40,000 customers look like and what a solar profile looks like. And to his point, yes, we are, assuming nobody really drastically changed their habits, but people do. And
I can tell you we do. We
Yeah.
make a conscious effort
Absolutely.
to try and use as much of that discretionary energy when we know we're generating energy. And so that's another part of the energy you don't have to buy. The part that we feed into the grid that you don't have to buy
Right.
from Tri-State, but there's another piece of energy that you can't really measure
Right.
that LPA is not having to buy.
But I can make the safe assumption that the energy we're having to buy is the 4-cent energy, not the peak energy. Because the peak happens at night. And so that's why I know, I don't need to.
Clock on that one August day.
Except, right. Every once in a while, it might be a 2 or 3. Yes.
I'm following on John's question a little bit, and I know it's not as neat and tidy as it would be fun to have be, but
Sorry, I can't make a darker blind over here for you guys, but
with future growth, I mean, you suggested we have substations in rural places we would never imagine, but I think about future growth and I wonder about the cost that is the facility cost. Is that the transmission lines? And as we grow as a community, this is the first time I've thought of energy in the same way as the costs that our community is incurring with growth related to sprawl and rural, roads and infrastructure. Electricity obviously is a part of that, but so do you think about, is there an incentive to have, is there a similar incentive where it could be cheaper if you live in town where the infrastructure already is, or is it so mixed right now that isn't part of the consideration?
right. And a lot of that gets, we try to rein that in a little bit with our line extension policies, and that we, it used to be that when we had a line, it was like we'd give you, I think it's like $14,000, and it's like, hey, and we just almost encourage people to go, yeah, stretch this line as far as you can for $14,000 and plop a house right there. Now it's really based more on, you pay for that cost to extend that line. So that sort of the pricing signal we're doing to try to pull that in a little bit. But yeah, there's not really a separate rate class for to prevent what we'll call urban sprawl or, something along those lines. It's really tough when, there's places in Pagosa where there used to be in the early 50s when we extended the power line down to the ranch, and it was just a single line as small as they could possibly make down to the, ranch to serve them, and that was a 40-mile line. Now we've established the presence of power, and now everybody in that ranch gets subdivided, and now all of a sudden the rest of our membership is looking at upgrading that line at a very expensive cost, and that's what Jeff's is here to solve our problems for. And and look at those other alternatives on things like that, because it pains us as a utility to try to come up with that. Yes, Jack. You can ask questions.
Do I answer? I was going to ask you if I get.
I'll give you one.
So, Jack Turner, I'm one of the directors here, and Dan presented some of this information to us yesterday, so I've had time to think about it. But one thing I appreciate you saying, Dan, is the difference in perspectives. And when I remember when we had the results of our cost of service study last year, when you look at all the accounts that we have residential here, and you broke that up into small business, large business, industrial, irrigation, snowmaking, whatnot. So correct me if I'm wrong, but when you look at the whole picture as far as the perspective of that, isn't residential, aren't we under as far as the cost of service studies? Or isn't residential in a sense subsidized by the larger classes when you look at a net perspective?
A little bit. We've really done a lot of work in the past. We obviously, if we knew one rate class was out, we don't want to increase their rates 10, 20% just to get them to parity. But there is a little bit from the large commercial class that pays towards the residential class. But I would say within the margin of error almost on some of those. We're getting pretty tight on those.
So it is that's really our meat and bones, right? So.
Or what?
I'm saying meat and bone, and that's really where our solid, stable accounts come.
Yeah, that's something that's there, right? Go ahead.
This assumes that every solar user is getting standard rate billing, and some are on time of use.
Right. Time of use looks better.
Right, and we heard about that. Well, I'm sure we will. What's the breakout in terms of actual solar producers in terms of time of use versus flat?
I don't know. If I'm going to venture to guess, I would say 5% are on time of use. Sue, what would you think about that? Okay. Tim?
Thanks, Dan. I understand that you're presenting these as expenses. And I would also say that they're also investments, right? So to the extent that there's another energy source within our grid, our local distribution system, that is an investment, similar to what you do with when you add that demand facilities charge of LPEA. And we all customers pay for that, right? That demand facilities charge. You add it on, right? That's what so in a sense, you might be double counting that in one sense. If you were to think of the aspect of solar installation, an energy generation source behind the meter here in our community, is actually an investment for us as all of us as customers. And I just offer that as another perspective rather than just putting it in the P&L rather than the balance sheet.
Right. Yeah, there's certainly that short-term, long-term perspective to look on different things. Here we are looking at this short-term, these are our costs today. In the long-term, be like, yeah, thank you for that asset. And, and what I do when I look at our loading and our, where those expenses are coming from, I add back in the solar profile of 6 megawatts of solar to say, what value has that added to us? Maybe I'm blind to it because it all happens on a net basis, as you're referring to, and it's gone. But add that back in there because one day I might find that, oh look, now we are a daytime peaking utility right in the middle of the day, and the only reason that I haven't seen that is because I'm only looking at it as a net basis, and it's been in this chunk that's taken out. So right now I'm adding that 6 megawatts back in, and it's going to be more and add more to that and become. Tim's shaking his head there. Yes.
Because you're talking about 0.8% or 1% of your power that's solar even during the day, even though it doesn't shade your peaks, still provides a basis for benefit from all of this. I mean, that is still an asset purchase. It is, or an investment.
Right.
So, I mean, if you were talking 100% during the day from there, I'd say, yeah, you've got a point there. So.
Yeah, I was wondering if the price of storage on a residential level becomes really economical, and let's say all your solar that you currently have residential adopt storage as well, are you able to speculate on whether that improves or makes your overall cost structure worse?
I've got a sort of a storage example coming up, and we'll circle back around. Not specifically for an individual, but we can speculate. Yes.
I like to go from the big to the small. When you look at your postal, the kids carry a ball. So ultimately we have a responsibility to our kids, and we know that coal exerts a cost on our future. So we have a responsibility to our kids, and solar is clearly addressing that issue of global warming. The second aspect is when we install local power that adds, we are a co-op that serves the community, that adds to the economic benefits in our community. The third thing now is the Maine Utility Commission, RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute, published that study that actually came from...
But not a utility commission.
Maine.
Oh, Maine Utility Commission.
Yeah. They determined that the benefit to the system is 33 cents per kilowatt, while they charge about 14 cents. Now they are a utility, so they realize that they don't have to build as many, add to their generating capacity, but they also line loss, everything was included. So they are ending up
Is it 33 cents a kilowatt hour?
Yes.
What do they charge?
14 around.
Well, then they're losing
And the
money.
benefit of the of solar, rooftop solar, local solar is 33 cents per kilowatt.
It could be in other scenarios where somebody's a very daytime peaking utility. I mean, like I said, we're a little bit unique here, and we're also not that vertically integrated utility. There's some differences between utilities, but I think 33 cents would be a bit of a stretch.
Well, that's what the Utility Commission determines.
All of our expenses are only 12.
You are only, as a co-op, as a user, you're not generating.
But generation included, it's no more than 12 to 15. So that's what
Stop
we're
the
at.
study and can send it to you. So there are all the ways of looking at it.
But like in Hawaii,
If it's a solar.
like in Hawaii, obviously, they're a lot more per kilowatt hour. They've got to import their fuels. That's why it's a very huge incentive to go solar there, because it's a lot more costly to generate electricity. So I'm going to keep moving on. We're about halfway through, and I got 2 more topics to go. 1 down, 2 to go. But I think they'll maybe go a little quicker. So the next one I want to hit on are purchase power agreements. A whole little bit different beast than the net metering is, on a way we've got solar onto our system. Now, when we do PPAs, purchase power agreements, we have some limited ability to do this. And we've discussed this in these workshops before about the 5% ability that Plata Electric has to buy power outside of its wholesale agreement. And we all know that we're pretty much bumping our head up against that 5% right now. But within that 5%, we do have some PPAs today. And those are independently negotiated with the person that wants to work with us to provide that. And LPEA, the way it works when we do these is that LPEA is compensated for the power it purchases from that PPA. We are credited from Tri-State as a credit on our bill, okay? Because everything gets metered that comes into our system. Now we have a generator in the middle of the system, and they say, okay, here's everything you've used, here's how much the generator's generating. We're going to give you this credit per kilowatt hour that they generated, okay, is what they're doing there. Now there's tables that they have, and that's, around the way they are lining up today, it's about 4.7 cents a kilowatt hour is the credit that LPEA can get. Now it's been higher in the past, and it sort of moves around with how market conditions go. But right now, if a person were to come in and say, hey, we want to put in this, and we had room in our 5% we could say, well, we're going to, we can do this and we're going to get about 4.7 cents a kilowatt hour for it. And those tables do increase over time. They'll go up about 2.7% annually over the 10-year period. Now, they can have when we negotiate a PPA, there's a variety of different frameworks that could occur during that. We could do a flat cost and say, hey, we're willing to pay you 5 cents, 6 cents a kilowatt hour for the entire term of the contract, because even though maybe we get credited at 4.7 cents now, maybe it's 8 cents later and it'll all come out in the wash. Or maybe we could say, hey, we can offer you a 4.7 cent rate that increases at 2.7% every year. Something along those lines. And that's the kind of things that we're looking for. Now, what PPAs do we currently have? We do technically have PPAs with each of the 4 solar gardens that we have on our system, but those PPAs really only come into effect if they're not fully subscribed. So La Plata Electric is not buying power directly from the solar gardens. It happens as a transaction between the solar garden and the customer. So it's sort of more of a net metering framework for those than it really is a PPA that goes into effect. But we do have one solar PPA, purchase power agreement, and it's designed to try to keep us whole. That's all we're asking for, just try to keep us whole over that time period. It would end up being a flat rate, and so we're paying more than we're probably getting a credit for now, but later we'll hopefully get a little bit more of a credit and it'll hopefully wash out. So that's what we try to. So PPAs can be a good thing for us if we can negotiate. Now, once again, it's up to the board to say, hey, how badly do we want this project to happen? Maybe the pricing at 4.7 cents isn't enough to make that project happen. The board might say, well, we'll give them 6 because that's what they need to make it happen. We need to give them 8 to make it happen. And then that would come back into our economics to the whole membership as a whole.
If you could just back up about 10 sentences. You said something about solar gardens and
subscribers, or
I think that was it. Do you recall what you said?
I was talking about we do have a PPA with them, but it only comes into effect if it's not fully subscribed.
Can you talk about that a little more? What does that mean?
So if there's a 200 kW solar garden, okay, and there are customers, subscribers that talk to that third-party owner of that solar garden, and then they have terms of an agreement where they subscribe to the solar garden owner. Okay. Now, if that solar garden owner is fully subscribed, in other words, all of their panels, all the capacity in their solar garden is accounted for, nothing left over, then we aren't buying the power from them because everybody else is. Does that make sense?
Is that in the category of net metering?
Yes. That's essentially what we call virtual net metering. You have an asset here, we're trying to make it like as if those solar panels are on somebody's roof. So the economics behind that transaction, pretty much the same as it is for net metering for us. Okay? Yes?
So does that mean we could have more solar gardens and not bump against that 5%?
It's part of the 5% right now. But even if, let's say we did have room under the 5%, we're still at that economic level of about 4.7 cents, which is probably doable, but it certainly gets to be challenging. Better, not as good of an environment as it once was, but solar panels are less, and so maybe it's still feasible.
So given the question she just asked, you said it was net metering, but then you said it does count in the 5%.
Yes. Ron, care to add anything else to that? It is power that La Plata Electric is purchasing, sort of. Normally, the solar gardens work differently than we do them here at La Plata Electric. Normally, a solar garden is owned by the utility, and then people subscribe to the utility. Here we've involved a third party that is somewhat transparent to the transaction at Tri-State.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind is how we did our Solar Garden program and policy here is there are policy limitations through the tri-state contract, and that's why there are these PPAs, and there's also some legal frameworks that we kind of dodged around because LPEA is the only one who's supposed to sell power in the service territory per state of Colorado. So a third-party solar garden technically is not allowed to sell power to anybody else. They sell it through us through contracts and policies, and that's kind of how it shakes out. So it does show up through the contracts that Tri-State does count it, because we do buy it even though we don't get the credits for it. It's a mushy issue. It's a policy issue more than.
So then my question is there a way to have it not count in the 5%?
Not without that solar garden being a utility, and therein lies the problem. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Tri-State's the one that's putting a 5% cap on you, right? It's not like Plata Electric.
That's right.
So you can put all the renewable energy you want, but they're going to cap you at 5%.
We'd be at a breach of contract if we did more than that.
Right. So you're capped at what you can do renewables.
Somewhat, to a degree, because there are other mechanisms by which we can put things in like that. Tri-State offers, now it may not look like it, but that 4.7 cents is an incentivized rate. And now if we can install solar at what is more of an industry avoided cost, at more of the 2.5 cents, we can put more in.
Tri-State's hedging on Plata Electric on renewables. That's what's happening. That's what I see is happening.
He said Tri-State is hedging La Plata Electric is what he said.
They're capping you on what you can produce.
Right, because the reason why they do that, they have an investment, obviously, to serve our load. And we sign long-term agreements saying, Tri-State says, well, you know, your load's growing. Would you like us to make another $500 million investment in this generator over here? We'll say, yes, please. And they'll say, okay, we need to make sure we aren't going to charge you for your portion of that full 500,000 or $500 million asset right now. Instead, we'll take it from you over time in power bills that you pay us.
Is the Plata Electric penalizing your contract with Tri-State if you reduce your demand charges?
No.
Commercially and residentially?
No.
No, if our load, yeah, it's a. What is the difference between generation and load reduction?
Right.
I'm just talking about demand charge. If you can reduce your demand charge, there's no penalty. It's just you pay for it.
That's right.
When you pull it.
Right.
So what is the goal of La Plata Electric to reduce the demand charge? Because I'm looking at you, and I've missed some meetings, but if you're looking at KWH, the costs and the demand. So what is the goal of the co-op to reduce the demand charge versus KWH?
Right. So we have things that we would like to do. We use electricity for. That's the kilowatt hours. We want to enable all of our membership to do those same things that they want to do. Now, we would love them to do it in the most efficient way possible. That saves our membership money. We are, once again, not here to make a profit. I don't care if you I would much rather you put an LED light in than an incandescent light. And so that's going to bring the energy down as well as the demand. But then where we can save that extra, where that real bang for the buck is getting that demand low.
So if you have a large commercial client in the co-op, and you can bring that demand charge down, is the co-op going to be penalized?
No, not if we net meter it behind the customer's meter.
Or do they produce their own power?
Right, then we're good.
No penalty. If a client can actually produce their own on-site, a commercial customer can produce their own on-site power, there's no penalty to that, maybe an interconnection fee to use, if they're not producing power, they pull from the grid and then they're back to the regular charge.
And I'll say under today's rules, under the rules of the game.
Co-op is not penalized by Tri-State if you lose a large commercial customer that's producing power. Okay.
That's right.
In fact, there's even, we've tried to negotiate with, obviously we have a lot of natural gas in our area, and it's very easy for these natural gas customers to generate their own power. We would, Tri-State right now is long on generation. That means they have more generation than they have load. We all want to retain that load because if that load goes away, Tri-State has those same fixed costs and the rest of us have to pick up that cost. So, we've been working with people and trying to retain loads as well. So.
Who's the PPA you have an agreement with, that you buy your power from?
We have PPAs with, I'm trying to think, can I say names, Mike? I probably can't say names. I can say we have a hydro facility. I probably can't use the names right now. So I'll say a hydro, a waste heat recovery, and a solar are the PPAs we have right now.
Great. And if someone builds a solar facility and they sell the power directly to Tri-State, does that count against your 5% limitation?
No.
So there is an out.
Right. Somebody can build, that's what Tri-State's Policy 118 is for. If you know, it even goes a little beyond that. There is, like I said, if somebody can put it in for a price that's attractive and competitive for Tri-State to purchase, Tri-State can purchase that directly. It goes into their mix of wholesale cost, and that's what they serve us with. And they've done that in the past. And La Plata Electric has the option even to say, to make that project feasible, because maybe what Tri-State could offer it isn't enough. Our board could say, hey, but we're willing to put in an extra penny a kilowatt hour to make that happen. So let me go up here.
Yesterday when you presented to the board, Bob Lynch made an interesting point. I'm not sure if I remember the finer points, but he pointed out that our demand charge is $20 per kilowatt hour.
Per kilowatt.
Per kilowatt, I'm sorry. Right, whereas the highest rate, let's say a solar system with battery backup might be reimbursed would be 23 cents an hour. So he was projecting, what if, say, an owner of a solar system with battery backup was able to time the release to the system during the demand period. I'm just wondering if you could speak to that. Would it be possible for us? I think you're saying, given the state of the technology, AMI systems and whatnot, I guess they're automatic monitoring systems?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of options available, and right now we have the time of use rate. We're sort of incentivizing if somebody was just to use the tools that we gave them today, they would say, hey, I'm going to charge my battery up either with off-peak energy or solar energy, and I'm going to release it during on-peak period at 23 cents, and maybe those economics will work out. It's going to be tough because then you're cycling that battery every day. Does that really hit our peak? A much more efficient manner of doing that would be for La Plata Electric to send a signal out that might be a more limited time. As long as we're still working with that 15% wiggle that happens at the top of our load profile, we've got a signal to work with. Otherwise, when we get below 100% load factor, now we just need to lower everything all the time. And so there's certainly some possibilities that we've got some battery projects that we want to move forward with and discover really what can we do and that sort of thing. But I'll get some more on battery stuff here in just a little bit.
Just wondering if it might be possible to play with the numbers and see what kind of incentives you could provide people with solar arrays if you said, if you made your full battery bank available during this time period, we could reimburse you at $5 per kilowatt or something. That would pay off the solar system.
Yeah, or maybe, it could be a fixed, we'll give you $200 up front, just let us play with your battery, and we'll use the top 20% of it, you use the 80%. There's any number of things that we can set up, but I do want to get through the rest of the slides here. So now we're going to turn into a dream phase. Okay, let's pretend there's no policies restraining us, right? I heard that giggle.
That sounds good.
Let's just go there just for a little bit, okay? And so this is that winter profile that we've been looking at. I'm going to throw out that same solar curve, but this time I don't have those percentages on the right. Let's say we really did actually install 120 megawatts of solar. Whether it be through a lot of individual customer sites, smaller 1 megawatt sites here or there. I'm probably not going to put a full 120 megawatts all in one spot. That's probably just not going to work with the way our system is configured. I probably can't do that. So, in looking at this is feasible if it's well distributed. That's achievable. But like I said, that key is well distributed. Make sure that the generations where the load is, okay? Definitely doable. In fact, that's what I'll call the Kit Carson approach. That's what Kit Carson was trying to do, was put enough solar in to meet that daytime load. Okay, that would offset, doing that would offset about 25% of our energy need here. Okay, that's 120 megawatts. That's 20 times more than what we have today. That doesn't sound phenomenally crazy. That's 20 times what we have today. That's a, you know, a number. So let's, you know, I just wanted to dig into this as an example that we had here. Okay, real rough numbers. Now don't say, oh, Plata Electric said this is, these are just real rough numbers, just to give us an idea of feasibility on some of this stuff. So if we had 120 megawatts, if it was at $2 a watt installed in the end, I mean, I think is that at all reasonable today? That might be more of a future price. Maybe it's where we're at today on something like that. 120 megawatts, $240 million. Once again, big number, but we're talking a lot of big numbers at Plata Electric, $100 million annual revenue a year. Okay, so, you know, that would offset our energy expense primarily at $9.2 million if we were to do that. Under today's rules and the way things work. You know, we're already sort of in a dream world here, so we're going to assume that yes, we're going to get that full 4.2 cents, that's our energy rate. Now, you know, would that whole...
4.2 cents?
That's our energy rate. Then you have to add that demand onto it, remember?
From Tri-State.
From Tri-State.
Wholesale.
Right. And so then, you know, the question is, you know, Tri-State's going to be very similar to La Plata Electric, is that they've got some of those same fixed costs rolled up. That's not just their fuel cost. If all that energy went away, do they really save 4.2 cents? Probably not. You know, you're talking more of avoided cost. We've talked about numbers, 2.5 cents. And so that comes out to be $5.5 million. So we're probably somewhere in that range is all I'm trying to say. So 240 million saving $5 to $10 million a year on something in that kind of example like that. And so that's, I guess, I didn't know if I had another bullet point. Was there any questions on, that was just, you know, a real rough number. We aren't talking energy storage yet. We aren't talking moving that out to the peripheries or anything along those lines. I'll start on this side.
Does that mean then if you wanted to amortize $240 million, you would need somewhere between 24 and 48 years to amortize 240 of those rates?
Yeah, and there's probably, I mean, I'm just trying to get. Right, real low numbers.
So
Yeah,
if you spend 240 million, you have a 24 to 50 year life.
Right, you know, and you're talking solar panels 25, so we aren't too far off. And I'm talking $2.
Yeah.
Can we get down to $1? You know, this is just a scenario working through there. I mean, solar panels can, you know, Ben was showing us projections of 33 cents, even lower. But you know, you've got to remember there's still the installation cost behind some of that stuff too, and that's probably not going to go up.
And what's the life of a solar panel? Useful life?
25 years? That's usually what I see people throw out when they're talking.
Life.
Warranty life?
You know, as we talked about yesterday, I mean, it's fine to talk about what the numbers are right now.
Right.
Which is what we're doing. And I think the $2 is pretty high. Depending on what size things you're talking, if you're putting in.
Megawatt type size.
Yeah, that may be reasonable. You probably wouldn't want to put something that small.
I wouldn't want to put much bigger than that.
Well, in any case, you know, as we talked about yesterday during the committee of the whole meeting, the solar prices are coming down rather rapidly. The Bloomberg estimate is that solar prices will drop 66% by 2040. And that's not the solar panel prices, that's solar electricity prices. So, you know, you're starting to get into, if you just look at what the numbers are right now, it doesn't look that attractive. But you start looking at what the numbers look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the whole thing flips. The solar becomes much, much more affordable than what we're paying Tri-State by far. So I think that's one thing we got to think about. The second thing is, as you said, Tri-State's got their money tied up in facilities that they've already paid for. I mean, they're not out there building new facilities. They may be putting in, you know, a few lines here and there.
I wouldn't say they're paid for, but.
Well, I mean, they're spent. They've spent the money. Okay, so if in fact we start bringing our costs down by shaving these P's, and all the other utilities do the same thing, what's Tri-State going to do? They have to have that amount of money that they're getting now in order to pay their bills. So they will be forced to raise their rates back up. Now, I mean, we still have to pursue this, because if we don't do it and the rest of them do, then we'll be at a disadvantage relative to that. The other thing that I think is important, again, for those who were here yesterday, is as the price of solar comes down, there becomes a point where, and 2026 is the date that, you know, we saw that solar would be half as much as LPEA is charging. So
Not what our expenses are, though.
Huh?
Not half of what our expenses are, though.
No, but we're charging 12.5 cents, and it gets down to 6.2 or something in 2026 if you follow that 66% that Bloomberg said. So what's going to start happening there, in my opinion, is people will start getting off the network. People will say, I've got two choices. I can either buy from LPEA, it's the only other person I can buy from, or I can put in solar and make my own. So if you're a business owner or a homeowner or whatever, and you've got a choice between LPE's rate up here and solar at half that much, what are you going to do? Well, some people probably won't do anything. They'll keep paying the LPEA rate. But particularly the large commercial customers and so on who are, you know, trying to compete with other businesses are going to say, you know what, it's now to the point where I can start making my own solar, either all of it, if I can add storage, or part of it, and those people are going to start getting off our network. And so we're going to lose revenue, potentially substantial amounts of revenue, and yet our fixed costs will not go down very much. And it's going to be a huge problem for us. And of course, it's also going to affect Tri-State. If this starts happening across all the different co-ops, it means that Tri-State's revenue is going to drop. So what can they do? What can we do? Can we raise our rates more to the people that stay on the network? Then there's just a bigger incentive for people to get off. So this is, you know, it's fine to talk about all this stuff. And, you know, Jack was making a point that we're talking about the 0.8% on the solar, and yet we've got these potentially existential questions that are coming up. Are we even going to be able to survive as the price of solar goes down? So, you know, my goal is to get the board to think about what the heck are we supposed to be doing here? We can't keep doing what we've been doing for the last 30 years and expect that, you know, the world's just going to pass us by and it's not going to affect us. So I just think that those are very important things, and it's fine to look at, you know, does solar make sense today? But the more important question in my mind is, does solar make sense 10 years from now, and does LPE make any sense 10 years from now?
Which is, you know, to Wynn's point, that's why we will probably look at some of those trigger points. You know, when does solar get down to a point where it's less than what, you know, our expenses are for that particular thing? So we're going to say, you know, can we get off the grid? You know, what can we do? You know, let's look at some of the energy storage options here. And I've only got 30 minutes, so let me try to get through here. Now, I know this is a bit of an eye chart here, and I always told myself I'd never put anything in a presentation where I had to say this is a bit of an eye chart, but I did anyway, just because, which is why I referenced the URL down there, so maybe I try to get a clearer image. But what this is showing are a variety of different energy storage technologies. There's not just batteries out there. There's flywheels, there's lithium-ion, there's lead acid, there's nickel-cadmium, supercapacitors, cryogenic energy storage, whatever that is, fuel cells pumped, you know, and what this is, you know, how much capacity do you need and how long do you need it for, okay? Different technologies fit into different niches there. You know, do you want to try to run a battery 24/7? No, that doesn't make a lot of sense. You know, maybe a pumped storage would make more sense to do something along those lines. So just saying there's lots of different technologies out there, and if you go to that URL, you might be able to actually see what that says. So here's what I call my non-scientific lithium-ion pricing projections. Is that enough disclaimers in there? So what I can tell you is that in early 2017, Plata Electric did go out and talk to some companies about a turnkey installation, like I talked that 1 megawatt, 1 megawatt hour kind of kind of clipping kind of thing. And what we were finding out, we were about $600 a kilowatt hour was what that pricing was coming at. And that may not mean much to any of you. We'll try to use some of these numbers here in a little bit. And the cost of the batteries, they were somewhere in the ballpark of $300 a kilowatt hour. And the balance of system, the land, the connecting it to the grid and everything else was about $300. Okay, I can benchmark that. Now I've seen forecasts that show batteries down to $120 a kilowatt hour. Could go lower, could be higher, I don't know. I'm just going to say, yeah, that's what somebody projected. Is that true? So maybe a turnkey project in total, and talking balance of plant, maybe another $180. Maybe we got more efficient the way we did. So for this, I'm using $300. A kilowatt hour for a future price that we can use on something along those lines. Now, this is just an interesting sidebar here. Do you know that a lot of us have somewhat batteries in our house already? We have, some of us have electric water heaters. That can actually be a storage. Maybe after you take your shower in the morning, you only top off a little bit of your water heater. Let the rest of that get charged from the sun itself. Now you're talking a water heater, that's $75 a kilowatt hour if you figure out the price of a grid-enabled, one of the fancy water heaters to do something like that. I just encourage us all to think, instead of jumping onto batteries right away, maybe there's other technologies that are lower cost that we can pick some of the low-hanging fruit. Now I can't run my blender off my water heater. Sometimes you just need the electricity, and then maybe you need the batteries for that. But use some of this storage that we have available to us already. Electric thermal storage heaters, for the winter time. That's another one. Just a little sidebar on that. So I'm going to go back to this daytime scenario. It's like, okay, what if we can shape this differently, and let's optimize that so that we really gain the most under our current rate structure that we have. Maybe we want to take that bell shape and turn it into this rectangle here. There's the same amount of energy in both of those shapes right there. And so, that's one of those things energy storage is for. And so that shaded area, that's the energy storage I need. I've got the solar on during the other times. And so anything that's shaded outside of the yellow that's still black underneath the green line, that's what I'm putting into the battery. And then I'm taking that shaded yellow region out of the battery later on. Trying to make an 80 megawatt resource that's there during Tri-State's peak period. That's sort of an optimal way to shape that solar then. Okay, and so I would need 420 megawatt hours of energy storage if I wanted to capture that kind of daytime use in there. Okay, so there's some more rough numbers. And let's say, I needed that 420 megawatt hours, and so let's say that if is under, there's another one of my disclaimers there, big underlined if, we had it at $300 a kilowatt hour. That'd be around $126 million. Plus the $240 million we were talking about with the solar, brings us to $366 million. Now, Plata Electric now saves more because now we have something that's on during that peak period time. Now I've reduced 80,000 kW at about $20 a kW. So I've got $28 million of savings instead of what we were looking at earlier, which was $9 million in savings, because I include that demand savings there now. So that certainly helped, but I had to add the cost of the battery bank to it. So does that make a better economic situation or not? Once again, I've got to emphasize, I'm really trying to focus on what is that long-term sustainable path forward. Now, obviously, if we took out an 80 megawatt chunk right out Tri-State's time and they weren't getting charged, we weren't paying them any demand whatsoever, that's probably above and beyond what the intention of that rate was designed for. And so Tri-State would react to that, and they would say, well, yeah, but really we're looking for that level profile. We were hoping you were just going to shave a little bit. If you've gone this far, here's the kind of pricing signal we're now going to send you. So it's once again, I'm putting a bracket around there, and maybe a more realistic avoided cost might be closer to 10 million or something like that. So once again, we got somewhere in there with some of this stuff. That's just, another thing. Yes.
So I have a question about the 240 million. Do you have any line that would compare that? That's you buying solar for $2 a watt installed, right? And how does that compare to incentivizing private people to do solar to get that much in the structure you're doing it now? You know, whatever you call it, subsidizing.
Well, yeah, I mean,
financing. How do those two compare? Do you know, if you get the solar a different way than just buying it yourself?
Right, I mean, if somebody else.
Keep encouraging.
We would want to do it through it'd be various models. You know, if we were to install 120 megawatts of solar, would we go to a giant corporation that does it and does it the cheapest, or do it local? I mean, that's the, decisions that we'd have to make at the time. I mean, is that?
Yeah, but I mean, assuming you're incentivizing solar now, right, that is encouraged.
Well, we'd certainly have a hard time incentivizing anything more than, if we're putting that much in, we'd want to do it at a cost, or else then that just takes away from our savings, right? So if we put $5 million of incentive towards it, that's $5 million less in savings.
Yeah, I got that. But, there's ways to encourage you to incentivize just private people to build solar, right? That may end up costing Plata Electric less than going out and buying it yourself. I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
So I was going to point out that, it's possible that you're off by a factor of 3 on the storage as well.
Right.
I mean, 2030, that's a long time.
Right, yeah, and I'm just.
There's a lot of projections where it's going to be well under $100.
Right.
The controls.
And that's why I think it's, none of us have that crystal ball that can tell us the future. And so that's why I think it's very important that, we work hard to try to figure out what those trigger points are. When these things, does it need to be cost parity, before we take action, or does it need to be, a little this side or a little that side of it? I think it'd be good for Plata Electric to have some of those trigger points in place.
Yet when you look at the crystal ball, we know that solar and cost of wind and PV solar has gone down far more rapidly than anybody predicted. The same is true with battery. So when you look into a crystal ball, if anything, you should look.
I knocked it down 60%.
I gave it a pretty good.
Battery costs are coming down 20% a year. And that's because up to 10 years ago we stayed with old-fashioned battery systems, and now suddenly research is being conducted that demonstrates how much more can be done.
And yes, thank you. And and once again, we're using this battery bank right here, and that's maybe a reasonable way to use a battery, is to try to block that out. But if we're trying to really levelize things and I have to have that battery running all the time now, is battery really the right technology for that? Is there something else that's out there that might be better?
Yes.
Is pump storage possible with like that?
I was talking to my wife about that just the other day, and I'm thinking, I think in my mind to make that work, obviously we can't pull out of the Animus right now running at 200 CFS to fill anything that we use during the day, but maybe we put another reservoir in Bodo Park and drain and fill and drain and fill, at various times.
Bridges Basin is a significant amount of energy.
Yeah. There's a lot of potential up there.
You could build a dam on the Animus, which nobody wants.
Yeah.
Right, I thought the same thing. I'm thinking pump stack, gosh, we got half of it there already. Yeah. The only trick is filling it back up with, 200 CFS of water. We'd have to have probably another reservoir down here. Now they do that or have done that in Telluride, Trout Lake, and Hope Lake. They go back and forth with that.
What's the efficiency on that? Because all the pump and the pipe and all these different factors that you lose going back uphill.
Yeah, there's certainly, and I don't know. Do you happen to know? I don't. But there's some, there's efficiency issues with batteries, right? You might get 80-90% of what you put in it back out of it, somewhere in that range.
Efficiencies of everything.
Yeah, everything. Chemical.
Everything has an efficiency level versus cost.
There's thermal, mechanical, chemical. Anytime you do that conversion from one form of energy to another, there's always a loss. That's why, you know, you take the energy that's in a coal, how much does that get to you? How much energy is in that BTU of gas? How much of that gets to you? Tremendous amount of losses and all that.
So there's a thing here that says wholesale rate structure likely not sustainable, isn't it? Yeah, I'm not quite sure how from that you get to the 9.6. And it seems to me that if the wholesale rate went up, right, we would see increased savings.
It wouldn't be a charge on demand. Maybe they split their fixed cost out and they say, okay, the Plata Electric, we have this many facilities, it's a fixed $2 million a month that you need to pay.
Connect charge.
Just like our base charge. And so then it just becomes less. That's what I'm saying, because it's really a fixed cost.
It's just a black box. You know,
Yes, you cannot determine how I got to the 9.6 from what I have right here. Really what I did is I took that 80 megawatt block and I squished it down to a 33 megawatt 24/7.
We just make the black box say 45 million. So, because we cover various savings from wholesale. I mean, that's another scenario.
Make the black box what? 45?
Reduce, to bring it to 45 million, that's savings and realistic avoided cost. Your bottom line.
Well,
I'm just saying, if you plug a black
right.
box in, you come out with, I don't know, some $10 million. The other flip side would be that we would avoid even more costs with wholesale rate from demand structure. And we would,
Right, because I flattened it at 33 megawatts and applied that demand rate to it.
I'm just saying,
The other thing to consider, you know, especially if you're cycling batteries on a daily basis, you know, you're probably looking at a 7 to 10 year life on something like that. So once again, I don't know if batteries are necessarily the exact right solution for something like that.
I'm curious about conservation measures and new technologies and what projections you might be aware of in just reducing the demand. We don't have to produce as much, store as much.
Right, that's always the number. It's funny, it used to be the number one thing. Before we put in solar, do as much efficiency measures as you can. Now it's getting to the point where solar is so cheap, maybe you can do that for less than you can insulate your walls for. But certainly I would encourage people to, you know, pick those low-hanging fruit, absolutely, those LED lights, and that's why, you know, we've got...
Not individuals, as a co-op, like as a strategy where you provide, I mean, the LED lights is a good example, that's easy. Some people don't like the hue, but it reduced consumption considerably. So what could the co-op take on as an initiative that would be a cost savings in deferred need to provide more power? Or like whatever, avoided costs in procuring more power.
I mean, we do.
Supply.
So I would argue, I would counter, I'd say the time use program is exactly that.
So why are we 5%?
We're trying to get people to reduce our demand, and we're passing that savings on. It's still using the same amount of energy theoretically, but we parsed out the demand cost component from our wholesale supplier. Any savings we see there, we get to that. The other one is LED, LPEA as a whole, I'll argue has been part of that because of our commercial lighting. We target commercial and we have a tremendous amount of rebates, and Tristate's a partner in that technically.
But only 5%.
But what's next?
Of people.
Yeah, we used to have, we have like 2,500 customers on time of use now. We used to be at 5,000 when there was some adjustments in wholesale rates that changed around. Honestly, all 40,000, maybe 40,000, at least 40,000 of our 42,000 members should be on time of use. They would save money. Everybody in here in this room should be on time of use. Solar means a little bit different story right now, but anyway, I got almost 10 minutes. Let me try to finish it. Let's say we go whole hog. Okay, this is the whole enchilada, 100% of LPEA's load sold by, you know, served by solar. What would that look like? How, you know, is that even feasible to do? That blue line is our winter load. That's down there at that 140 megawatts. That's the solar profile you'd need to fill in all the rest of those gaps right there. It's significant, you know. So could I put in 600 megawatts of solar and serve that? You know, it wouldn't be feasible without a lot of energy storage, right? I cannot backfeed. I don't have a system built to carry 600 megawatts of power. I can guarantee you I can't do that right now. But if you distributed all the solar, if you just coupled that with energy storage at the loads, yeah, that's feasible to do. That'd be a fun thing to try. But some other things that we have to keep in mind is that we still may need some dispatchable generation available. There are cloudy days. Our solar, I mean, these are 3 perfect solar days right here. This isn't something that would typically happen 365 days a year. And so, you know, when I took actual solar profiles for the year, took our actual loads for the year, and said, okay, how much energy storage would I need in worst case scenario to carry us through the maximum number of cloudy days? We're blessed here in Colorado. We get a lot of sunny days, but occasionally we do have 4 or 5 cloudy days in a row. And so, you know, would you really want, numbers I came up with were, if you oversize the solar some, because you can put solar, you know, more solar in for less than you could energy storage, if you oversize the solar a little bit, and you'd have to put in maybe 3 times as much energy storage, 3 to 4 to 5 times as much energy storage to carry you through some of those cloudy days. Now, would you want to make that kind of investment for something that you only use 5 days out of the year? Probably not. You know, that's, unless you just said, I want to be 100% solar no matter what period, yeah, we could do something like that. But you know, you probably are going to want to have that 150, 140 megawatts of dispatchable generation. Maybe it's natural gas or something along those lines that comes on and runs during that time. Then the next logical thought is, well, if I've got that 150 megawatt generator just sitting there, should I run it more often? But that's a different topic and sort of gets out of the realm of what we're trying to do here. So our objective would be to get that, you know, everything above the blue line into a battery so we could use it down there, you know, at the lower times. You know, same thing can be extrapolated for a single home as well. You know, maybe you can capture, and that's what anybody that's trying to produce 100% of their usage, you know, would have a profile, something along those lines, where they're way overproducing during the day in order so they have enough to use during the night. And sometimes, especially if they're electric heat, they really have to overproduce so they have enough stored up in the virtual bank for the winter time. So some things to consider are, you know, maybe since we're a winter peaking cooperative, maybe we tilt those panels a little more steep than you would for maximum production. Maybe they're a little steeper so that we can get more wintertime gain out of something like that. You know, once again, this is if Plata Electric was putting something in to maximize what we needed to serve our customers. A customer probably wouldn't do that because they'd get less kilowatt hour production if they put it at a steeper angle. But as far as what would meet ours, maybe something like that, like I talked about, maybe oversizing it some too. Now, what I'm not considering is, I'm assuming I don't have any other infrastructure improvements that need to be made, because I'm hoping that this is all distributed across our system, really nice and clean. I'm not including any extra cost for redundancy. You know, we have a very reliable system. 99.7% of the time your lights are on. And although solar and batteries are going to be reliable, they aren't going to be there 100% of the time. So, you know, there's no cost in there for redundancy. We also talked about single axis tracking and how that really paired up with our load profile a little better. So in this example, I was adding 30 cents a watt for single axis tracking. And, you know, if we were to put in the 600 megawatts of solar at $23 a watt, that's a really big number. Now we're talking billions, you know, 1.3 billion. Now I'm taking a little different twist on this because there is expense. There's a cost of money associated with anything. And so I've got cost of money, depreciation over 25 years. That's an annual carrying cost of about $138 million a year. Energy storage, more numbers. And, you know, I don't have any, you know, if we're addressing cloudy weather, do we want to put in additional energy storage or possibly 150 megawatt combustion turbine? And we talked about that being rarely used. LPEA would avoid paying our entire power bill, you know, all $67 million a year or so. We would not have to pay that. You know, that's sort of the summary. Currently, today, our expenses are about $107 million in total. We have approximately $40 million of internal expenses, $67 million that go up to Tri-State. And then with that, this one example that I'm throwing up here, you know, of course, you know, does LPEA even exist? Maybe that $40 million goes completely away. But if you're trying, you know, if they're all in individual houses, maybe there's no needs for wires at all. If they're distributed 1 megawatt systems throughout the system, then maybe you do still need some local wires. Hard to say.
You guys are gonna become solar repairman.
That's right. Maybe Maytag. We could, yeah. You know, who knows what the future holds.
But
You know,
we're beholden to Tri-State till 2050?
Yes, yes. Or you know, we've talked about contract buyouts. You know, we can look at
Well,
options
without
along
something
those-
like that,
Yeah.
it blows everything out of the water
Right.
that we're talking about.
Right, and so that obviously that's you know, the way extreme the other end. You know, I was just trying to throw some ideas out there. On this.
So I actually did the same analysis for my house, and it comes out almost exactly like that. You know, it's those ratios of buying power from LPEA and Tri-State versus really backed up, stable, disconnected from the grid.
Right. You know, and most people that are disconnected from the grid would have a 10 kW Kohler Honda generator or something sitting there for when the sun isn't there. And that's today. You know, like Gwen said, that's today. You know, what does it look like? You know, let's not have the blinders on. Let's keep our sights open and try to make all that come to reality sometimes. Just bottom line is that what I'm trying to get through during this presentation is energy is relatively cheap. That's, you know, when you pay us $21.50 plus $12.56 a kilowatt hour on the standard rate, about 4.2 of that cents of that is for that energy. And that's really what that solar is offsetting today. And I've got lots of numbers in here we can all digest later, but we talked about the net metering and that impact. Purchase power agreements can be a good thing, you know, as long as, of course, we aren't paying out more than we are receiving as a credit or offsetting expenses by. Now there's, you know, a whole nother topic with QFs and QFs as qualifying facilities. There's other options there, and you know, we've talked about the headroom of Plata Electric with that 5% as well. But bottom line is, you know, transforming solar into that dispatchable resources, which what we're sort of trying to do when we say 100% solar. That's easier said than done. I mean, there's a lot of challenges associated with that and a lot of real money. And, you know, but we have to keep our eyes open on all that stuff. And, you know, and one of the big challenges we have is, you know, our profile is largely, where that little bit of fluctuation we do have is a little bit opposite that of solar, and also largely flat. So there's just a lot of energy there that we have to handle somehow. Either we need to get, you know, transform habits, such as, you know, using more energy during that solar profile, trying to get that solar profile over there, a combination of both. I mean, there's steps and a progression that we can take towards this, where we say, hey, here's where we are today, and right now we're simply trying to incentivize people to use power off that peak, and then maybe one day our profile is flat, maybe one day it inverts a little bit, and we will change pricing signals accordingly. And in response to that is sort of one of the paths forwards on that. So, wow. Okay, we'll start on this side this time. Yes.
So I think you maybe focused on solar because it's something we can put on
Yes.
our house. But I just want to point out that wind is a great source of energy too, and it peaks in the nighttime usually, which matches up better with LPEA's peaks. And so, you know, if you can complement the solar and the wind, then you have less of a period during the day to ride through with the storage. So I think it'd be, you know, that's a much more likely scenario to getting to renewable than I think than.
It is, but maybe not here. We just don't have a lot of wind.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to bring it, you can't do it like locally, but it can come from Wyoming or Arizona. And so.
Yeah, as a nation as a whole, we cannot forget about that. That wind is a very, very large portion of it all.
What strategies does LPEA have to encourage more time of use customers to switch?
So, you know, occasionally we do, we'll call it media blitz. You know, we'll go out there and say, you know, there's going to be a Colorado Country Life article in there this month, radio ads, bill stuffers, you know, those kind of things that we try to communicate to those people. And then the next step would be, we would like to have that be the default rate. And so then people that come onto the Plata Electric system, they sign on, they by default go on to a time of use rate if they opt otherwise. You know, I'd like to get our percentages up on a more voluntary basis, up in that 70 to 80% people being on time of use. And then maybe someday we say, okay, hey, if we're there, that'll be our mandatory rate because it more closely aligns with our expenses. So just really trying to encourage word of mouth. It's funny watching the curves of participation. It's really going up right now.
Dan, I'm on time of use, and my bill shows me how much I save every month by being on time of use. Can we put that information on non-time of use customers? Say, had you been on time of use, you would have saved this amount.
Yep. That was. I'm sorry I left that one out. That was actually one of the bullet points I had in my presentation yesterday. Was that would be one of the steps along the way, would be to put that in there. We still have a couple of challenges with making time of use available for every single aspect of every metering circumstance right now. We can cover 99% of the installations, but not some of them.
So every dollar that a member saves on time of use is a dollar less revenue for LPEA, right?
Yes.
So how much are we actually saving? Are we saving that dollar?
Yes.
Are we? I mean, I'd really like to see those numbers sometime.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the design, because that's when we design the rate. We take tri-state. Now there is some. We're assuming now if we peak outside of that, what we've designated as on-peak hours, yes, we're in trouble there. But.
That, so our 5% cap, that's mostly made up by a gas generating electricity plant.
It is waste heat recovery.
There we go, thank you. And so is there any way we can incentivize Tri-State to purchase that so then we really do have 5% that we can generate in solar?
We tried that during our last negotiation period, and we couldn't get to a acceptable price for that person not to use that as their own generation. So that was a situation we had there.
I just wanted to thank you. I think you're a great presenter, Dan. I think we all appreciate you, and you explain things well. Part of what I feel...
Is there a bug coming?
There, yeah. I want to you do a fabulous job. But part of what frustrates me, and I guess it all is that in this kind of presentation is we immerse ourselves in numbers and in the business model, and the logic all checks out. The assumed working model is what we have, which is heavy use of carbon. And, of course, as yesterday the board meeting discussion of the effects of carbon were put off the table quickly as soon as they're brought up. And I assume that's not part of your job to explore that.
Yeah,
but I'd just like to say, there is a huge discussion there. The externalized costs of fossil fuels are huge. If Laurie Costello were here, she'd be talking to us about health effects. Sure. And they're big. But climate change is one that's not even quantifiable. I don't know how you put it up there on the chart.
And it's really tough. I know I've said this 100 times today, but with La Plata Electric not being vertically integrated, so we don't have the exposure to those costs until they hit Tri-State and until they pass them on to us. I mean, it's a wicked game, but we have a price signal that we can react to with our rate.
Have you considered what would happen if there were, in fact, a carbon tax implemented?
Have I personally? No.
That seems like something that could potentially happen in the next 5 to 10 years. There's even Republicans that are, very much in favor of a carbon tax. So, it seems to me like that's something we ought to at least be looking at, is what would the effect be?
Right. And the great thing about solar is that it's a fairly quick to implement, not nearly as long and drawn out as putting in a coal plant, that's for darn sure. And so, it can be, we want to be as proactive as possible, but there is some room to be reactive when things like that happen, and where maybe our exposure to that is 1 or 2 years before we take action.
But can we even take action? I mean, we're again stuck with that 5%. We would have to react to Tri-State.
Then that buyout becomes more attractive, right, if that roof.
Of course.
Another thing, you were talking about coal. I mean, I like the idea of solar completely, but if you look at, you know, coal and its mining and health costs, you also have to look at the enormous amount of heavy metals and, I mean, bad stuff that's in solar panels. It's good, it's safe when it's in solar panels, but it has to be mined, and it has to be transported, and it has to be recycled when it gets old. I mean, you've got to include that in your cost of, if you look at it as a sustainability counter. And that's sometimes people will just look at solar as a shining gold example, but I mean, you look at the lithium mine, and it's this nasty, ugly pit, but we need the lithium to make lithium-ion batteries and solar panels and all that. So that's just one thing to remember is nothing's perfect, but you do have to factor in those other things.
Thank you. And I'll take one more question, Cliff, and I'll let you guys, I'll be here afterwards, so you can come up and catch me, but.
In our current contract with Tri-State, how much freedom do they have to adjust our rate structure?
So Tri-State is just like Plata Electric, where they have expenses and they will set the rates based on forecasted sales. So, you know, there is no cap that says they can't change rates 20% next year if they wanted to, but we're all on the board and, you know, we don't want that to happen, so we'll beat down on them and try to make sure it doesn't, but, you know, the expenses are there and that's it. But I want to thank you guys all for coming out here tonight. It's great input, and I'll be around if you want more questions. Thank you.
Steve, was there a proposal to put a solar farm up on the old tailings pond?
There was, yeah.
So close to that substation.
And the DOE